start out with item 1.2. Well, before we go on to the next item on the agenda, you have to call the closed meeting to a close. Well, you're quite demanding tonight. Well, I might be rusty, Mr. Mayor, but not that rusty. I'd like someone to move that we call the closed meeting to an end. I'll move that this be so, Mr. Mayor. Be it resolved that the closed meeting be ended so that we may enter into the committee of the whole meeting, moved by Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Lalonde. So let's go on to item 1.2. Be it resolved that we accept the hiring of Mr. Martin Irwin as Manager of Community Relations and that he be subject to a probationary period of 6 months, and be it resolved that Mr. Irwin's salary be pegged at level 1, class 4 of the non-unionized salary grid of non-unionized employees. Fine. 1.3, be it resolved that council be hereby authorized that Mr. Dave Darch's contract be extended for 2 days per week until June the 30th, 2018 at his current rate, to be funded by the operating budget of staff vacancies, relevant charges, and staff consulting resources if required. Now moved by Councillor Lalonde and seconded by Councillor Levert. All those in favor? Carried. And thank you. Would someone care to read item 1.4 now on your eScribe document? I don't have item 1.4. I do have item number 2. Well, that council ratifies to negotiate the negotiated collective agreement between the Clarence Rockland Township and the Volunteer Firefighters Association for new agreement for the years covering 2018 to 2021, and that $30,000 covering the costs associated with this agreement to be transferred from the contingency fund from the operating budget, and that council authorize the mayor and the city clerk to enter into a signed agreement with regard to the new agreement. Seconded by Councillor Berlinguet. All those in favor? Carried then. Thank you. Is that it? Fine. A directive has been issued also for the sale of a parcel of land. Fine. Let's be it resolved that bylaw 2018-03 being confirmatory bylaw for the regular meeting of the 15th of January 2018 be adopted. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. All those in favor? Carried then. Thank you. Closing of the meeting at 10:05. And the Committee of the Whole meeting has now been opened at 10:06 p.m. Let's go on now to the Committee of the Whole. Adoption of the agenda. I move that the agenda be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Guillaume, seconded by Councillor Levert. All those in favor? I'd just like to withdraw item 5.1, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Fine. Thank you. No pecuniary interests. Fine. No petitions. Question period. No one. Oh, announcements. Oh! I thought I'd skip that item right by everyone, under everyone's noses. I'd just like to advertise that the Saint Pascal Carnival will begin on the 24th of January until the 29th of January. There'll be ice skating evenings, movie nights, draft nights. Any other announcements? Mr. Mayor, I'd like to seize this opportunity to congratulate the Bourget Volunteer Association. Councillor Levert and myself attended the last Saturday events that were set up in Bourget. There are things that I've never seen in any municipality. They've distributed over $50,000 to individual volunteer groups. I thought we were dealing with a Trillium Foundation at one point in time. Well, I deemed it, I baptized it as the Bourget Foundation. You know, they host bingo games each and every week, and they distributed $50,000 throughout the community. Councillor Lalonde, the same thing also occurred last Saturday in Clarence Creek. There was a parish association that was involved in an event that hosted over 150 participants. Mr. Mayor accompanied me to hand over the annual trophy to the most deserving volunteer. I agree, Mr. Leon, that those type of events are quite important ones, important events. Without any volunteers in any communities, it's hard to have things progress, especially, Mrs. Poirier de Bourgette and Mrs. Mercedes Avignoire in Clarence Creek that work very hard in organizing similar type events. I'd just like to mention, Mr. Mayor, if you'll allow me, it's unfortunate that the City of Clarence and Rockland does not have any such organization. We should try to organize such events. Well, they rely on volunteerism in those locales that we just mentioned, I know, but we should try and do the same here in Clarence and Rockland. Fine, let's keep on going. The petition policy, are you not going to, don't you give us a report with regards to the United Counties? Well, I didn't have much to say. I was over in Jamaica at that point in time. But there's one thing I'd like to mention, however. I'd just like to have you keep in mind that the Prescott Russell residents, and once again, Mr. Saint-Amour, stated that they've incurred a deficit of $5 to $6 million. That means that our part of the contribution that Clarence and Rockland gives out to the United Counties and Prescott and Russell supports this type of establishment that runs a deficit each and every year. And if we take a look at what other centers do that come up with a balanced budget at the end of the year, that makes no sense. I'm just wondering what's happening. I've spoken to some individuals who told me candidly that there were needless expenditures. There were a whole mess of problems with regards to this $5.6 million deficit with regard to the Prescott Russell residents, housing 50 individuals all in all. Even half would be enough to inject funds that would allow us to build 2 residences anew by the year 2025. It's quite ridiculous, and I can guarantee you folks that I'll bring that to everyone's attention next week. Let me tell you this, Mr. Mayor. I had occasion to speak to Mr. Stéphane Parisien last week, and I told him that we had until Monday, January the 8th, to put forward a request to be part and parcel of the advisory board that's hosted by the province with regard to the Highway 17 174 truncheon. Mark Lucci, I recall, considered all municipalities' requests, and even if roadways did not belong to municipalities making requests per se, those people attended the advisory committee meeting and made presentations. Those who wanted to take part in advisory board meetings needed to send their request by the 8th. Those who wish to make their submissions in writing have until the 19th of January. We have to follow up on this. I remember that the committee sits down and takes a look at who made a request for what. And if we haven't come up with a request for the 174 Highway 17 project, things might just grind to a halt. Fine. Item 9.1 then. Let's go on now. Councillor Levert. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council adopt policy ADM 2018-02 with regards to petitions. Seconded by Councillor Zant. I just want to make sure here that we just adopted directives with regard to that. There were none beforehand, and now we've also fine-tuned a template with regard to that also. Fine. Item 9.2, developers meeting. Councillor Lalonde. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Let me see. Whereas the Infrastructure and Planning Department convened a meeting with the city's developers and builders on December 13th, 2017, and whereas a number of significant development issues were discussed at this meeting, and whereas report number INF 2018-018 provides an overview of the discussions and action items arising out of the December 13th, 2017 meeting, that report number INF 2018-018 be received for information purposes. Seconded by Councillor Berlinguet. Any questions? Yes. Uh, uh, there are two side issues that caught my attention in all of this. I had occasion to discuss some of this with you, but one of those 2 points is this. The developers stated that many of the plans are quite old, those that apply to Orion's Ridge and others. And it becomes quite unfair for those new developers that wish to develop new projects here in town because they're not playing with the same set of rules as the previous developers. So now I believe that we have to oversee and overhaul this situation. Residents, for example, that wish to add something to their homes, such as add on a deck or a pool, uh, they have to fill out a whole bunch of paperwork, but they're not helped along in doing so. The comments I receive the most are those: the municipality doesn't help me in filling out the paperwork or doing what I need to do to accomplish what I need to accomplish. And I believe that this issue has risen through discussions through community or committee-related discussions that we've had every 2 weeks. Councillor Rivarol, well, I believe that we entered into a second meeting with developers. I believe it's a step in the right direction. I like the rapport that we're creating with the developers that we're meeting with, but I'm just wondering what we're doing with those comments that we receive from developers. Now, will your department improve relationships we've had with developers? I'd like to determine what kind of actions will be taken based upon their remarks and their suggestions. What does the administration do once we receive comments? Sometimes, there might be heated discussions involved, but we do receive some extraordinarily well-intentioned comments on the part of developers. And what is your view of what needs to be done in the next 6 months to meet to deal with everyone's requirements? Well, I believe that we've reviewed all of the comments that we received. We've implemented pre-consultation needs, and we're in the process of implementing annual work plans inherent to individual departments, and we'll need to determine how to go about incorporating all of those suggestions we've received, implement them in a concrete fashion, and that they be implemented through those individual departments that they impact. And also to ensure that these meetings remain pertinent and to have developers feel that things are progressing, that we need to give them a feedback as to what has been done since our last meeting. Well, what I'd like to see is to delineate those actions that need to be taken and the net result of what needs to be achieved. I mean, we receive comments, here's our action plan, and this is what needs to be done in the next 6 months. If developers phone us up, we can tell them then, well, in keeping with what was told to us, this has been done. If some developers say, well, this has been raised, but that has not been done yet, well, we're in a better position to answer them then. Councillor Zant, thank you. My question's been answered, Mr. Mayor. Just to add on to what Ken has mentioned, because there are a few items in your report that specifically states that you will review this from a departmental standpoint and determine what needs to be done from this point on until the next meeting. If there's something that you decide in your office, we need to be advised of what you will be deciding upon so that we can advise the developers of what will be done. Fine, all those in favor? Carried. Going on with the operational budget report, November 30th. Report FIN 2017-048 being the financial operating budget status for the period ending November 30th, 2017, be received as information. Seconded by Councillor Simard. I can tell you that I'm a bit disappointed when I took a look at this report. I didn't expect to incur such a deficit with regards to our daycare centers. I thought we'd resolved those problems 2 years ago. I thought we'd just done away with those problems. I'd like to have a monthly report given to council each and every month from this point on to determine where we're heading because, we're dealing with a $500,000 deficit here. It's quite a serious matter, and I don't know how we wound up in this with this here. Ms. Collier, Mr. Boucher, what's happening here? How will we go about fixing this? Well, the deficit really is made up of two components. A part of that deficit, approximately $220,000, is directly linked to salaries and social benefits. So there was a discrepancy or a shortfall that was incurred during the last fiscal exercise that we entered into, and the other component is directly linked to lower user fees because of the lower number of users of services we offer. Also, we were called upon to move the daycare center facilities. This should have been done at the beginning of January, and the moving date was pushed further on and pushed further on. And let me be honest with you that throughout the course of last December, I analyzed what needed to be done, and once the analysis is over and done with, we'll have to incur a financial shortfall of some 230 some odd thousand dollars that we'll have to address in the next few weeks. Indeed, and we might address this at the next meeting. Well, I'll be in Jamaica at the next council meeting, but I would certainly like to be in attendance to uh, shed light on all the challenges that needed to be met when dealing with Mrs. Boris. I won't be able to attend the beginning of February meeting, but on the second meeting, during the course of the second meeting in February, I'll be there to deal with this issue along with Mrs. Boris and Mr. Jubin. We have quite a challenge before us in 2018. Look, when we were discussing budget, wasn't everything looked into? Well, the first 200 and some odd $1,000 item I was not aware of. We noticed it at the end of November. That's part and parcel of the $500,000 shortfall that we've alluded to. Now, the other part came up these last few weeks with regard to the daycare center. You're saying now that we have less users now than before? So is the same thing happening that what happened with the public transportation? The higher the rates, the lower the number of users? Well, no. We closed the Carousel Daycare Center, and there was one daycare center that decided to close its door during the summertime. So we lost clients because of this. When a preschool child, for example, does not want to be shuttled from one daycare center to another and to another during the course of 1 year, you see. And we know that following the assessment of rates offered to parents, we have $220,000 of income that was over and above what was expected. We have a list of expectations with regard to preschool children. Yes, preschool needs. We have a lot of tools right now available, and we have to uh, tackle individual issues to ensure that free space is filled as quickly as possible. Well, now, what I don't understand is how come you came up with a shortfall of such a magnitude with regards to salaries? Well, the salary component is a separate entity. It's a separate component. I can't elaborate with regards to this at this point in time. Well, if you close daycare centers, you have, of course, a reduced number of clients. Now, there was a mistake that slipped by with regard to the basic budget, whereby benefits had not been calculated at their proper rate. The salary remained, the last salaries remain. Frederick, can you help me out with regard to this? Yes. Now, this was explained in the consolidated 2018 budget. As Mr. Boucher had mentioned, there were some benefits that had not been properly tabulated, as well as remnants of the 2017 budget side benefits that had not been tabulated. But we should have saved on salaries because we didn't have as much income as anticipated. Let me tell you this. Now, in a group of 14 children, you have you're obtaining 14 sources of income. If you have 10 children, you have the same ratio of employees, but you only have 10 sources of income, you know. So we need to maximize groups. So what I mean by assessing situations by using past mechanisms, everything was assessed with a view of 16 sources of income. But we know that users vary from month to month. So a potential group of 16 that only has 13 children, well, the budget will be tabulated reflecting 13 children instead of 16. We anticipate $200,000 more than what we receive as income. So, this being said, is it possible to manage on a month-to-month basis and pay out on a month-by-month basis what needs to be paid out? And if you note that there's a group that is not as great in number as other groups, then you can adjust your payouts accordingly. I understand what you're saying, but there's a group that'll pay uh, for 12 in Bourget, even though I have a waiting list in Rockland, they don't certainly want to attend the daycare facilities in Bourget. That's why it's a complex matter, you see. If I take a look at the report, of course, we've incurred a total deficit of $318,000, taking into account all department needs. Overall, the city is expecting a deficit of $318,000, which is primarily due to spring flooding events and daycare centers. There are other departments that compensate this shortfall, but my question is that if we remove the $175,000 flooding damage that we can't recoup, how will we go about paying the $318,000 remaining? Well, Mr. Mayor, the $318,000 includes the library, $70,000, and they have their own financial income. The net amount then is $247,000 for the city of Clarkson and Rockland. That includes flood contingencies that was mentioned beforehand. So we're going to tap into our reserves, we're going to tap into our tax stabilization reserves and this tax stabilization reserve, once we will have paid out the amount owing, how much will remain? Well, around $700,000. But we've also put in an accumulated surplus an amount of hovering around the $300,000. Well, we come up with $318,000 less the daycare centers, and you're saying that with our stabilizing fund, this will bring down the amount to zero. We don't want to wind up with similar figures at the end of the year. Well, let me explain the matter further. When you take into account the accumulated surplus, those are reserves that are set apart. Those are not Main Street reserves. Now, let's say that we have a surplus one year and then we incur a deficit another year. These are all put in or tabulated in those reserves unless we receive, you know, con- contrary indications. But at the end of 2016, we were hovering around the $300,000. So the $247,000 project deficit will be applied against this $300,000 surplus, but we'll bring that sum to zero. But we can't incur a 200 and some odd $1,000 shortfall each and every year, as the mayor has alluded to. Fine. What I don't understand, I just we just went through a budget process. Why are we talking about this now? Why did we not know about this stuff beforehand? Why did we not know that these things are now haunting us now? I understand what Mr. Boucher has stated about Mr. Key daycare. Mr. Kehoe has said, well, $70,000 applies to the library. It's almost like a roving budget all over again now. Well, you see, the library we knew about. Okay, fine. But why are we still discussing losses? This should have been done at the budget. We should have known at the end of the year how much. Well, sometimes things happen because the year had not yet finished. Well, next year, let's just do it in January, Mrs. Collier. So, what we're looking at, right, is the year and fiscal situation. We came to you in September and told you that we projected a deficit of 150,000 approximately because of the impact of the floods. Now, we had not at that time, well, we had been at the department at that time point. Mr. Boucher had not picked up on the situation with the daycare. Fortunately, we had pluses and minuses with other departments. And also at that time, when we spoke to you, we did not know whether the province, well, we didn't have it in writing, whether the province was actually going to give us the money or not. Since then, we received that as of a week ago. I think you told me yesterday that we have a paper or document stating that we'll receive the money. And we only know at the year end after we've done the budget. We're bringing you this information with what we felt comfortable with and what we're projecting. The situation with regard to the daycare matter is a situation that we have to deal with. Had we known, and probably we should have known in the budgetary docs we entered into, we should have known the daycare for sure. But the actuals with regard to the deficit has always been things we've tackled after the budget. It's the result of the year. It was projected at 150 and now it's at 250. The last time the report was made to council, it was reported at 150, only the flood, and now it's up to 250 because of the pluses and minuses that have occurred in all departments. How much money did we get from the? Oh, we received 600. We got 642,000. $642,000 and 7%. It's a big picture. If we put the flood aside, the deficit of the city was $100,000 on a $38 million budget. That's not too bad. We never aim for a huge deficit, but if you take this deficit into consideration, the big picture, that's not all that much. And because we put this accumulated surplus aside to project ourselves in a fair view for the future, and we won't know until the audit is done exactly what needs to happen. But we'll bring you that report in May, I believe, right? With regard to the audit, the final financial picture. Mr. Lalonde, did I hear you right? The deficit for the flood, the expense would be 250 instead of, no, 150. 153. That's what's reflected on this particular document. But my question is this. At this present time, have we put any expenses on the long-term debt besides that? At the end of December 2000,
at the end of
31st.
December 31st.
Did we add up some long-term
Did we add
debt
up some
beside
long-term
this
debt
deficit that we have now?
beside the deficit that we have?
Well, Mr. Mayor, we didn't issue any
Mayor, we didn't
new
issue
debt
any.
in
We didn't
2017.
issue
We
any
did
new
not
debt in
issue any, no,
2017.
we did
We
not
didn't issue
issue
any.
any
We
debt, but
don't
we
issue any
made
debt, but
debt
we made
payments on
debt
our
payments
outstanding debt.
on our
So we've
outstanding
made
debt.
debt
So we've made debt
payments
payments
of
to the tune of
1.7, well, was
1.7
tax
was
supported,
tax
but
supported,
in
but
all, it's a
in
bigger
all,
number than that.
it's a bigger number than that.
Yeah, it's a little
All
It's
over
right,
all
3
fun.
million.
thank you. All those in favor then?
Yes, sir.
OK. Tout le monde en faveur.
Carried.
Projet de retour d'investissement en matière
Reinvestment
d'atténuation
project.
d'inondation le 15 janvier
The
2018.
Committee of the Whole recommends the Council to mandate the Coordinator of Community Services and Management to continue its participation in a joint project to assess the yield. There's no cost to that, Mr. Wilson? Well, there is a cost, man-hours.
It's man hours.
Man-hours.
So,
I'm sorry, we need to second this motion first. Seconded by, yes, by
Secondé. Suivi. Zan.
Councilor Zan.
OK.
I guess that
yes, my question is.
we don't know because it's a
we don't know
project.
because it's a project.
Over the next 3 years, it's not going to cost us anything financially,
Anything
but they
financially,
want
but they
us
want us
to
one
put a
on
person on this
to run
committee
that
or project.
on
And
that
do we know how many
Do we know how
hours
many
this project?
hours that person will spend?
Well, Mr. Wilson, the projected ask is for half day a month, to participate in a flood mitigation return on investment project that's funded by the federal government. That's what's funded by the project. When will the
When
meeting
will
be
the
held?
meeting be
They'll
held?
come here for a lot of information gathering. They'll come to Clarence and Rockland for a lot of that. They're based in Ottawa, so there may be meetings in Ottawa or over the phone.
Or over the phone.
Well, I'm,
Well,
I'm,
I'm not saying I'm not. C'est comme Monsieur.
I'm thinking the same as
Disent, bon, ben,
Mr.
4 heures,
Lalonde
c'est tout
is
ce que tu
thinking.
vas à un meeting de 4
You're
heures.
taking part in a 4-hour meeting, but then you're given 10 hours work to do after that, and then you have to take part in
Parlez pour moi, je sais.
teleconferences. Speaking for myself, because that's how I do my work.
Et on sait
But
que
any
n'importe quelle décision
type
qui va être prise
of
pour aider
work
les
done to
inondations,
alleviate
ça va coûter des sous.
flood
Et en ce moment, de ce que j'ai pu lire du rapport, il y a
flood difficulties. There's nothing done at this particular time. That's how we're. I just want to make sure that if we say yes, that we take part in this project, that we be made aware of progress of this project, and we'll let Mr. Wilson tell us if it's really worth taking part in this project. At the end of 3 years, if we're told it's going to cost you so much to alleviate difficulties or hardships because of floods. Well, Mr. Mayor, I believe they spoke about this at the United Counties level, and the United Counties level is entering into a study with South Nation River Authority with regards to floodplains. Would you like to defer any final decision? No. I think we can decide on this right now. Let's go to the first meeting right now, see how it is, and if you don't feel, Mr. Wilson, that it's worthwhile, we'll just pull out of it. If it's something that's going to take many hours, not just 4 hours or 10 hours,
10 hours of your time.
well, we don't need that. As Mr. Lalonde stated, the counties are talking about doing something with the South Nation Conservation Authority.
County itself.
Maybe there won't be any need with it when all things are said and done. You need to take a look at what needs to be done. Mr. Wilson,
Yes, Mr. Wilson.
why don't you talk to Louis Prévost as to this? The big thing that they want is our information as to what happened with regard to our flood outside of the South Nation and Rideau Valley, because we don't have a conservation authority that oversees what happened on that stretch of the river. Hopefully, we'll get some information back once a proper study has been conducted. So
So do we,
let's go for the information
say,
and come back to us and let us know how things are working out, if it's worthwhile in your view. Is everybody in agreement with that? That's fine then.
everybody in favor of that?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's go on now with the Transportation Master Plan and Active Transportation Master Plan. Mrs. Simala recommend that Council adopts a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign a contract with Stantec Consulting Limited in the amount of $102,715 for the execution of the Transportation Master Plan and Active Transportation Master Plan. Seconded by Councillor Berlinguet. Any questions? Go ahead.
Question?
Was that included in our budget perspectives? Yes. It was included in our budgetary forecast. We've been out to tender. Well, I'm sorry, we have not yet been to tender with regards to this yet. That's something that we had occasion to discuss, Mr. Mayor, at the Planning and Land Management Committee meetings on many occasions. Well, I understand what you're getting at. But we came up with a global plan in 2005, and we have to take a fresh look at things now because of the expansion that Carson Rockland is undergoing at present. But what you're alluding to dealt with one specific region. All those in favor then carried. Last item on the agenda, distribution of grants for community activities. Councillor Lalonde, yes, Mr. Mayor. Whereas the City of Clarkson Rockland received an amount of $10,000 from the United Counties of Prescott-Russell to cover certain costs for cultural or recreational activities, the Committee of the Whole recommends to Municipal Council to accept the amount of $10,000 be granted as follows. $5,000 to the Ottawa River Festival, $3,000 to the Ottawa Day Celebration, $1,500 for artistic endeavors such as art exhibits at the City of Clarence and Rockland Cultural and Recreational Complex, and $500 to the Clarence Rockland Senior Games as recommended. Seconded, fine, seconded by Councillor Lalonde. Any questions? All those in favor then? I had a question here. Are we talking about a second? Are we not thinking of giving any money to the Country Music Festival? Yes. Any questions for department heads? I have one question. The patrolling officer will be on the road 4 hours a day. Will he or she? Yes. Will he be responsible or she be responsible to report any burnt out street lights? Well, that individual will be patrolling a segment or part of our streets and not our whole road network. Well, there are at least 20 burnt city lights that are burnt out. The entrance on Laporte Street are all closed down. One on Marion has been burnt out. One at the corner of Julien and La Violette. There's another one that's burnt out at the corner of Héritage and Sylvain. There are some burnt out lights on Laurier Street. One at the corner here around Clarence area. We have a whole bunch of burnt out street lights. Yes. Why don't we just, I'm not going to patrol all streets myself. I understand. But we're dealing here with a particular segment. If there's a segment where there are no burnt out LED lights, however, well, let's just put it this way. We can make the contractor aware of those lights that are burnt out, and he will take proper action. Well, there are some burnt out lights on Corbeil Street that have not yet been replaced. There's been a burnt out light there for the past 2 months. It's easy for the patrolling officer to patrol all of our street network to at least indicate those lights that he can readily see have been burnt out and relay them to client services, and I have to go back and take a look at the addresses to determine what lights have been burnt out. Councillor Lalonde or Mr. Lalonde? Now, because of the warm and cold climates that we're going through, alternating warm and cold climates, one of the things that the department has indicated to me was this. If it's determined that water is frozen past the control valve, the individual home's control valve, well, it behooves the homeowner to take proper action. I think we should take a look at it. having some plumbers made available. You know, if we are connecting homes to our water system, we need the plumbers that work on the connections to be approved. And apparently, the town doesn't care about plumbers working here. Everybody, you know, I don't understand the logic. If a plumber is going to, you know, play around with our connections and thaw out a water line, then I believe this plumber should be, you know, agreed upon or, you know, or approved by the town. It doesn't have to have necessary documents, but at least approved by the city of Pleasant Rock. Well, look, if you have a plumber's license, they're issued by the province of Ontario. And if he's licensed by the province of Ontario, well, it says it all. I know that when we worked on a water connection on a residence on London Street, we had difficulties. We need to be told who the plumber that performs the work is. We're told the panicked resident because he has no water at home that he has to take care of this situation himself and hire a plumber. Well, you see, sometimes one doesn't know where to go and what door to knock at to obtain help. All a homeowner wants is to obtain help to, you know, get water to his home. And we have to help out a resident. He was told, you know, you have to phone up Clearwater. Clearwater says, well, no, we don't do this. We're not involved in thawing out water connection lines. I think that not everyone is equipped to work with the standpipe there. If a resident needs to be supplied with water, why don't we take a look at offering 3 or 4 plumbers that are city approved? And if if the resident needs to pay for their services, fine. If the town has to pay for them, that's fine. But I understand what you're getting at. Maybe we can draw up a list of those plumbers that are equipped and to perform the work that needs to be done. If a new resident doesn't know much about anything and phones, as far as who to phone and what to do, that resident might be encouraged to phone up the city of Clarendon and Rockland. The city of Clarendon and Rockland might supply him or her a list of suggested plumbers without necessarily telling that resident that he or she needs to hire the services of those individuals. But still, fine. Any other questions then? No other questions? Fine, so meeting then is adjourned at 10:45. Thank you.